Hello and welcome to Chapter 10, Virtualization, Cloud Computing, and we'll talk about printers. All right, don't forget to take the notes that I asked you to and submit them as homework. All right, so what is virtualization? Virtualization, write this down so you'll know the definition if anyone ever asked you. Virtualization in computing is when one physical machine hosts multiple activities that are normally done on multiple devices. All right. There is two types of virtualization. There is the application virtualization, when one computer can serve up to multiple applications such as web servers, email servers, file servers, desktop applications such as Microsoft Office or Adobe Acrobat. The other type is the desktop virtualization. Uh, it's also called client-side virtualization. This is where you create a virtual machines in if you in VirtualBox, if you ever used it, Hyper-V with Microsoft or VMware. All right. You have to have a hypervisor to allow you to create these VMs or these applications virtualization. There are two. A hypervisor is the software that allows you to do this. You can either install it on a machine that's already on a machine that's already has an operating system, or the hypervisor could be installed on bare metal before the operating system itself. The hypervisor is the one that's Oracle VirtualBox, Microsoft Hyper-V, or VMware. So the two types of hypervisors is type 1. Type 1, please write this down. Type 1 is the hypervisor installs on a computer before any operating system, and therefore it's called bare metal hypervisor. After it installs, it partitions the hardware computing power into multiple VMs, virtual machines. A different operating system can be installed in each VM. This is mostly used for server based. So if you want to have a lot of servers, you would do this. All right. So you got the hypervisor on the physical machine and just keep creating VM servers. Now you could have Windows 10. This is hypervisor type 2. So write this down as well. Hypervisor part 2 is when you install a host operating system such as Windows 10 and an application, and is sometimes called the hosted hypervisor. Now, like VirtualBox, Hyper-V, and like I said, VMware. So you have Windows 10 as the host. You could have VirtualBox as the type 2 hypervisor, and then within VirtualBox, you can create your VMs. Okay? All right. Now, make sure, regardless if you're going to use type 1 or type 2, when you want to do virtualization, that you have the fastest CPU you can get, the maximum amount of memory you can have, and the maximum amount of hard drive capacity. Because, all the work, this is going to be your central point where all the work is coming in. All the users are going to be getting in here to use their virtual machines. Now, what's the advantages of having virtualization? Well, obviously, you don't have to dedicate physical machine to all these virtual machines anymore. All of them are happening on one machine, and it's all software. They don't interact. It's as if you have physical machines that are being separated. But you do have to have the hardware to be able to do this. All right, so let's talk about securing virtual machines. When you want to secure the virtual machine, you do it as if you are securing your regular local host device. Make sure you secure the VMs within the VM itself, isolate the VM for best security, and secure the files that hold the VM, and secure, of course, the host computer that's hosting them. All right. So that's that. Here's an example of VirtualBox. We'll play around with this in class. We'll be able to do something similar to that, and we'll be able to install operating system as well. All right. So let's now talk about cloud computing. What is cloud computing? So write the following down. Cloud computing is when a vendor or a corporations make computing resources available over the internet. Again, it saves you a lot of money. You don't have to have the hardware and the software and worry about the upgrades or any of that. You access it through the internet. It could be storage. You could have apps that you can get from there, from the cloud. You could do whatever you want. All right, there is public, private, and community, which means shared by multiple organizations. And of course, there is the hybrid cloud computing. Public is for everybody. Private, nobody else can do it. You can do that for your own organization if you want. All right, so let's talk about the elements of, the elements of cloud computing. Let's get into that. Service at any time, on demand. You can do, that's what's good about cloud computing. As long as you have a username and an access to the internet, username and a password, of course, and access to the internet, you'll be good to go. All right. Elastic service and storage. So that's important to know. So write this down. Rapid elasticity refers to the service ability to be scaled up and down as the need level changes for a particular customer without requiring hardware changes that could be costly for a customer. Amazon AWS, the Amazon Web Services, are famous for that. That's what makes them big. Really, AWS is big because of their elasticity. Also, support for multiple client platforms. A platform refers to an operating system. Resource pooling and consolidation. With resource pooling, services to multiple customers are hosted on shared physical resources, which are dynamically allocated to meet customer demands. You have measured services, so they can bill you. What else do you need to know? Now, I want you to write this down. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, down here, has developed a standard definition for each category, which varies by division of labor, of the labor implemented. So I want you to really somehow write these down. So this is the tradition on-site LAN. If you use the IaaS, you really, the vendor controls the OS, the virtualization, and everything else, but the client only controls the applications and the data. If you're doing PaaS, which we'll discuss each one of those in a minute, the vendor manages these part of them. But if you're doing SaaS, the vendor manages everything. All right. So what is IaaS, which stands for, write this down, IaaS, I'm going to call it, is the infrastructure as a service. That means if a customer can rent hardware, including servers, storage, networking, and can use these hardware services virtually from anywhere. You can get a server, you can get a switch, anything that you want. That's IaaS. PaaS, which stands for Platform as a Service, a customer can rent the same thing as IaaS, and you can also, of course, get some applications that might support other applications at the customer itself. The PaaS, the platform, this is good for software developers. So you may not, interact with PaaS service. SaaS is a software as a service. Customers use application hosted on the services providers, hardware and operating system. Like Microsoft Azure has that, like getting in applications through the web browser. So applications are provided through the online interface and are compatible with a multitude of devices and operating system. Your online email services such as Gmail and Yahoo are a good example of SaaS. Okay? And then you got the XaaS. That means anything. You can almost do anything. And again, the two biggest guys in the cloud computing is Microsoft Azure and I would say Amazon AWS. Google is in there too. But the biggest are Microsoft and AWS. All right, let's talk about application virtualization. Where are we here? So applications. Using application virtualization is made up of variable users by application by virtualization servers and does not need to be installed on the user's computer. Cloud-based applications, which is a form of SaaS, is a software that resides on the server in the cloud and user access the software through the browser. For example, many companies are moving towards rentable software or software by subscription, such as Adobe or Microsoft. Much cheaper. You don't have to upload anything, or you don't have to update or worry about failures or anything like that. All right, let's talk about setting up a client computer to use the cloud. Now, VDI, let me explain what that is. So write this down, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. That means when a cloud server represents a client, a desktop. VDI is when you are given a desktop, like an operating system. There are three types of clients when you are connecting to cloud computing. Number one, please write this down. There's the thick client. Thick client is sometimes referred to as the fat client. Is used as a client by the Hypervisor server. Sometimes it runs its own local operating system. So the thick client has its own operating system. They just need to access specific apps maybe from the cloud. Thin client is a PC like a Chromebook that has its own operating system, but it needs a browser to communicate with the server. The server does most of the work for them. So that's the thin client. The zero client, like a dumb terminal, like a Wise client by Dell, just hardware. Doesn't even have an OS. You need to have, to set up a zero client, you're going to need special software from the VDI vendor. All right, so let's get into setting up thick or thin clients to the cloud. Well, before we get into that, we need to know two things: persistent VDI and non-persistent VDI. Persistent VDI, write the following down. Persistent VDI is the user owns the virtual desktop, and it can be customized and saved for the future use. When the user signs up, he or she picks up where they left off, which is nice. So probably that's a good idea to do. Now, non-persistent VDI is when the user receives a desktop from a pool of desktops, like an operating system. And each time you log in, you get a new desktop. Think of it this way. The persistent VDI is like having a static IP address. You just do your work, and when you come back, you continue doing your work. If you don't care about, finishing up where you left off, then you do a non-persistent VDI. Every time you just log in, you just want a desktop to do your work. You can save your stuff locally if you want and worry about the rest later. All right, so we'll continue with this on the next part. So please write down what I told you to write down, and don't forget to upload them as homework. And I'll see you on the next video.